when you're selling an as a service model, you're really saying, hey, I'm going to put this equipment on site, but I'm actually going to be responsible for it because I am the service provider. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that it's all your team. And that's the power, obviously, of partnerships. So if you think about, let's say, the life cycle of any piece of networking equipment, whether it's a firewall, switch, access point, whatever it is, you've got this process that you go through where I've got to assess and design what the customer needs. Hopefully that's in a pre-built package, right? I've got to install it and deliver it on site. I've got to configure it and set it up either on site or remotely. I now have to support that either with a NOC and or SOC and provide managed services that's affiliated with that. And then I also have to renew it at the end of the term. Now, if you're looking at this and you're a traditional VAR, you're like, oh, this is a lot of crap that I don't have the capability to do today. And so that's obviously where we're going to talk a little bit about partnerships. Now, the first kind of big opportunity, I think, when you're thinking about the services lifecycle is how do you put bodies in buildings to install and configure things? And obviously, we've got Chad on the call with us today. And so the next few slides, Chad, I want to start talking through some of these things. And so talk a little bit about how you at Kinetix, what your business model is, and feel free to go as long. We've got a few slides here on some of your product offerings, but go ahead and jump in and talk about what you guys do and how you help.
Yeah, I wish I would have taken the cue from you a little bit earlier about my background, but just to tie into how we do this today, I, like you, had a service provider. We were focused on the legal vertical and did a lot of the deployment on a regional basis or local basis. We had our own W2 techs. We would install networks. Now, this is a long time ago, so this is like Novell and things like that. But I started working with a company called Contingent and started working with this variable labor cost model. So putting techs on site, and really viewed a lot of this stuff as skeptical at the beginning of how do you get a person to go on site to act as me to do quality work. So they have to arrive on time. They have to be able to communicate clearly. There has to be check-in, check-out methodologies and put these things together. And what I learned from Contingent was how to really build and scale that model, and almost this Darwinistic element where we'd identify the right techs and the right skill sets and having diversity. So that if I needed to run cabling to enable the back office or the devices to, techs that can configure things on site, which has changed rapidly with the whole, we now work with service providers to provide all the engineering support, and we put smart hands on site that basically can take instruction and complete this. So when we do this work today, we have a platform we call Dispatch One, which is integrating with your platform that we look at every tech, the background of what they've done, making sure they're compliant in the work that they do, and have that scale and scope on a 24/7 capability. Over the last 6 years, we've developed a global workforce, so we are truly 24/7. So if it's after-hour work, and we're doing cutovers, and a lot of cutovers happen at weekends and after hours, et cetera. We have absolute scale to that. But for us, what's critical is to be able to assure that there are the right elements so that the service provider has a good outcome. Any kind of soft event like communication, they don't clean up the workspace, et cetera, creates end user experience and escalations. And from a global perspective, what we've been able to do is provide an agreement in USD that gives you predictable pricing. Last year, we're in 108 different countries that we've been on site completing work for a variety of small to large providers. And when you think about things globally, because a lot of your customers will have manufacturing plants or different types of facilities, they're expanding globally, that shouldn't prevent you from being able to, expand the scope of what you support for them. So we're looking at the currency risk. We're making sure that everything we provide we manage that. VAT, any of the tax implications, all when we provide a transaction, it's inclusive. There's no withholding tax. There's no VAT taxes that we're collecting later. And we have known techs. So we're putting techs on site in different countries that have experience with us to complete that. We have full support across the time zones. And of course, it's being able to communicate with the people that can check in and check out to make sure that everything meets what the insight was looking for, as well as the checkout with the group there.
Yeah, so my job is writing software or creating software, and your job sounds way more difficult.
Well, sometimes it depends. It's human beings, and so that's why every tech that
Exactly.
we work
Yeah.
with, we match them with another person to make sure things are there. And this is you're so good at your lead-ins there, Phil. So for us to create an optimal result is the first thing. We have to have good definition. So when a tech is going on site,
Yeah.
sometimes we have failures because we're not giving them good instructions. So
Right.
it appears to be a bad tech, but if you're told to go on site and not given much information, then that can create the wrong outcomes. We spend a lot of time in talent development, so making sure the right skill sets. This is, I think, an exciting area of our space where, because of the remote technologies that exist, we can have reliable, predictable people, but your teams can also augment. You don't need a checkpoint certified tech to be on site to configure a device. We have to make sure we have accessibility to that device, and then we can then help resolve and remediate and get the tech off site. And then it's also building the right pro formas and budgets. To your earlier point, there's a variety of different labor costs that's out there. In the United States, we have a lot of challenge with co-employment. So if you put techs on site in certain states, you have to make sure you're compliant in a lot of different ways. So having the budgets to put that together makes all the difference. And then, of course, if it's coordinated correctly, we think all these things to get together create a quality outcome.
I love it. So when we were, of our or a service provider, we were using services like Kinetics as well, and we would get into a situation where, we might have 300 locations we have to cover, and I could look at my team and go, I think we can get to 50 locations, in the time frame we need it. And then we would go and try to find you to outsource and to partner with. And I think the key there on your chart here is it's the coordination. Like, to the customer, it really needs to feel like one service provider. That's the company that they're working with. And then your service needs to feel like it's integrated directly in. And so what I like about what you've done with your platform, if I could give you some props here, is you focused in on the software and the API framework so that could feel seamless. And if you think about this from a customer's perspective, our customers are ordering pizza and they know the real-time status of their pizza. And if they can do that, they should be able to order millions of dollars in network infrastructure and services and know exactly the status of what's happening at their sites.
Yes.
At any given time. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about just stories here before we move on from you, Chad. So talk about some of the deployments you've done, because I want people to think about it in, how can I use this? How can I do this at my company? Whether some of the companies on the call here today are actually telcos.
Yeah.
And then some of the companies are MSPs and VARs. So run off a handful of stories on how people are using your service.
Yeah, and just for a point of clarification, so Starbucks is one we did. That was what we would call an end client. We are channel focused on what we do. So we would go on site. There was a rollout. There was an ATA. There's some network infrastructure updates. 8,500 locations, and we had to do that, in a pretty compressed period of time. So we're doing 35 to 50 stores per day. So we're looking at tech coordination, local logistics, getting the right edge devices on site. And then we even augmented that team, because when you're doing a rollout of 35 to 50 locations, we typically are released from that site by the carrier, by the MSP or the telco. So we go on site, we do the swap out, we do the cabling, we're going through these scripts, and then we're checking in, and everyone's saying, yes, everything that we expect is occurring, and the tech is released. So depending on how schedules are set up, and this is where you have to stagger things so we don't overwhelm the service center, the help desk, or the NOC that is taking on that event, we have also leveraged our Cebu Center in the Philippines with technical coordinators that kind of on an as-needed basis help augment that check-in, check-out. I'm calling that out because not only is it us adding techs on site to get scale for the reach, but you also have to plan for, when I'm doing a rollout that has the compression, you need the ability to release that tech. And that means your staff has to be available to receive the call and go through the test out methodologies, and we can help augment that. But that's an example of what we did with the carrier, and that just shows breadth to it. Joann's is another one that was a total back office refresh. This gets a little bit more complex. We're refreshing network infrastructure. There's cable cleanup events that occur. A lot of times you go into these locations, you're changing out that infrastructure. There's a lot of opportunity to look at what the battery statuses are. We've seen situations where there's old equipment, the cable needs to be cleaned up or repulled, and it's multi-site, so it's multiple days, staggered over a period of time. A lot of this stuff in these cutovers, of course, are after hours, very limited windows of time when the tech can come on site. The store gets shut down, it has to be reactivated. So there's milestones that you're looking at, if we're going to migrate a particular element of that network, that all parties agree that we're able to meet that so the store can reopen. And so that's looking at a lot of different skill set diversity, because structured cabling might be different than some of the network infrastructure that needs to be set up there. And then we're coordinated tightly with this service provider to make sure all those events, because not only is it the MSP that is telling us, yes, the tech is ready, but the end customer also say, yes, my store is back into operation and the devices that we're looking for. So there's almost these bridged events that are out there. This is another one with
the question here is, how many case studies are bragging and how many are appropriate? You put 3 in here. So,
yeah.
So the rest of the webinar is going to be case studies from Chad.
Yeah. Sorry, this is my last one.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, this one has to deal with more specialized teams. So sometimes if it's a more regional area, you have tiger teams that can kind of roll over from site to site. And again, coordinating that with the groups and putting those things together. And this really comes from years of success and failures. I mean, going back to the original slide, having the right budget, having the right expectations, the right installation scripts, it is a fully integrated event. So even though we want to position ourselves as being subject matter experts in field services, it's a commodity, it's a utility of it's out there. So we have a constant pressure to drive down our costs, but it's a fully integrated solution, and it has to be nuanced. So when the tech goes on site and the teams are doing these rollouts, all these different elements have to be coordinated. And that's where the service provider becomes that architect, bringing in these different providers. And so when we go on site, we appear as the service provider. So again, these are end clients for us. They may or may not know who we are, and that's by design. But in order to get a tech to leave a site successfully requires all parties to be synchronized in that event.
I love it. So the other thing too is when I had a service provider business, the installation and feet on street was one of those things that was really hard to predict. Because you might have a rollout for a customer and you might have hundreds of locations, and then 3 months from now you're not doing anything like that. So it was really hard for us to hire internal staff, not to mention managing the check-in and check-out, and making sure that those technicians are behaving properly when they showed up on site, that maybe they hadn't smoked marijuana before they showed up. Maybe they, don't hit on the people at the, there's just all sorts of stories we had when we hired technicians ourselves.
Yeah.
And so it's just a great opportunity to outsource that to somebody like you, that's what you deal with. And so I think that your job is also very hard, but also very necessary.
I think even the largest of service providers, I spent several years at CompuCom, which is a very formidable IT service providers out there. 3,000 plus W-2 staff, but when it came to rollouts, very much using this contingent labor pool that is out there. There's a lot of different talent pools that exist. This is the great thing about platforms. So finding techs are becoming, I think, a little bit easier, but the key is to tie together all those different elements in coordination. And is really the key question is the currency of the tech that's going on site. So using service providers like us might have a tech that we are spending multiple transactions with,
right, exactly.
We know who they are.
Exactly.
And so that can mitigate some of that risk, because bad things do occur. And this is Darwinistic. I mean, if techs behave poorly, that we can remove them from the site. We can, never use them again. But we do find that many times the use, the core issue of that failure is not always the tech. I mean, there's a lot of different events that occur that we didn't do a good job of preparing them to go on site. And that's where I think these platforms become more pervasive, is because when they arrive, we need to have well-written instructions and be very precise of what's happening out there. And so we feel like it's still a human to human interaction that has to occur. We believe in the future of AI and all the things that are occurring, but when you want a person to arrive on site and have that interaction with that with the site contacts, those are the things that drive the strongest of experience. And I think the key question to ask the providers is, how current are you in this particular area or country or city that you might ask them to do work for you in?